everyone. Well, hi. My name's Jasmine, and this is my colleague Danielle, and we're from the UK government, the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. And today we're going to be talking a bit about the Developing Countries Trading Scheme. Danielle here will give a bit of a background and some of the countries we cover in the scheme, and I'll go over some of the key features and benefits and talk a bit more about some of the resources and guidance that are available to you if you are interested to know more as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Danielle.
Hi everyone, I'm Danielle. I'm a policy advisor at the FCDO with the Developing Countries Trading Scheme team. So we launched just over a year ago in June 2023. This is some of our launch communications. As you can see, we are featured in Reuters, the Business Post. This is the head of trade for development Paul at the FCDO on some, looks like an African news channel. So we launched the scheme to support three core objectives. So it is widely considered the most generous and simple preferences scheme in the world. It was designed to replace the previous GSP preferences scheme. It's a lot better than the previous scheme in lots of ways that I will go into more detail later. The scheme impacts 65 countries worldwide, mainly in Africa and Asia, and we also have Bolivia and South America. The scheme covers 3.3 billion people. That's over 40% of the world's population, so it's a very wide reach. It has a wide impact for the UK and other countries. And it's worth around £23 billion a year of exports and imports, so it has a massive impact on our economy. We offer duty-free, quota-free trade on thousands of products, which leads to £770 million per year of reduced import costs. So this, again, has a massive positive impact on the UK's economy, benefiting consumers and overseas businesses. So the scheme is supporting three core objectives. We want to support sustainable growth in developing countries through simpler and more generous tariffs. It's a unilateral tariff offer. We want to support UK businesses to retain supply chain resilience. So as we're going into a more chaotic, unstable world, this is really important. We do this by diversifying sourcing and benefiting end consumers through improved quality and price. And we want to strengthen economic ties between the UK and fast-growing developing countries. So, as I mentioned, this covers 65 countries, and it's split into three preference tiers. So we have most countries are under the comprehensive preference tier. This is the most generous tier. 99% of products are duty-free in this tier. This is everything apart from arms and ammunition. So this covers least developed countries, LDCs. And the next tier we have enhanced preference. This covers 16 countries. This is for economically vulnerable countries, and it's still very generous. 92% of products are duty-free. So as countries graduate, it's not a really steep curve. It's still a very generous tier to help them as they hopefully graduate through the schemes. And then our last tier is standard preference. So 65 products are still duty-free in this tier. This is for economically stable, low-income and lower middle-income countries. So this is just India and Indonesia in this scheme. And I'll hand over to Jasmine for the next few slides.
Thanks, Danielle. So I'll just talk a bit more detail about some of the great features and benefits and the core objectives that Danielle mentioned. So firstly, tariffs. So as Danielle mentioned, countries on our comprehensive preference scheme, so that's 47 countries, are entitled to 99% tariff-free, duty-free. So that's, as she said, all everything but arms and ammunitions. With the enhanced preference scheme as well, that's 92% of goods. Compared to our predecessor, we've introduced 156 tariff cuts for the enhanced preference tier countries, and we also got rid of some nuisance and seasonal tariffs, again, making the scheme more accessible and more generous. All in all, this is around £770 million of tariff savings. Next, I'll go on to rules of origin. So With this scheme, we've made it more generous for the least developed countries, those LDCs, particularly on the product-specific rules. So countries from this tier can source up to 75% of non-originating material or content for their products. Also, we've introduced for the product-specific rules as well, I think about 70% of the rules are alternate or rules. So if countries find it difficult to meet one aspect of the product-specific rule because it's too difficult due to reasons which may affect developing countries, as you can imagine, they can meet the other. So again, opening that up to more countries. Also, we've made it a lot more simpler in terms of I think it's around 54 chapters have one rule at the tariff heading. So this would be like the HS2 level. And I think there's very few on the HS4 level as well. Next, another way another key change that we've made from our predecessor and a benefit is accumulation. So DCS countries are able to have bilateral accumulation. So this would be countries are able to source goods, source material, sorry, not goods. That's a key error there. But yeah, they're able to source content depending on the product-specific rule from either the UK, the EU, and Norway and Switzerland as well. LDCs are able to have extended accumulation, so they're able to source content from other DCS countries, as well as countries the UK has an economic partnership agreement with. So these will be countries such as South Africa, Kenya, to name a few. And then we also have inter-regional accumulation groups. So we have two, one group in South Asia and one group in Southeast Asia. And we also have intra-regional accumulation. So countries within those groups are able to source from each other as well. All in all, in Asia, in Africa, there's about £2.4 billion worth of trade. And in Asia, there's £9 billion worth of trade. So by opening up with countries to accumulate materials from each other, we're strengthening value chains and regional integration and resilience in that region of the world. And as you can see from an example up there, a shoemaker in Tanzania, which is an LDC, it can use leather from Nigeria, a country on the enhanced preference scheme, and glue from South Africa, a country the UK has an economic partnership agreement with, to qualify for tariff-free exports to the UK. Next, we'll move on to conditions. So the DCTS has the power to suspend a country from the scheme. This is based on international conventions, so things such as human rights, labor rights violations. We've now extended that to include climate change and environment. As well, the scheme has allowed for enhanced preference tier countries to be able to meet that criteria of that tier. Countries are assessed on their economic diversification and economic vulnerability. And also countries in that tier no longer have to ratify conventions. So all in all, that meant that 8 vulnerable countries are able to garner the benefits of the scheme that otherwise wouldn't. As well, we've just made the actual terms of the scheme a lot more simpler and generous as well. So for instance, if a country was to change preferences because they've developed. So, for instance, if they move from an LDC to an enhanced to now being classed as a lower middle income country, we've allowed a 3-year transitionary period, and as well as if they were to sign an economic partnership agreement with the UK, and allowing them that time to transition as well as, I guess, so to give confidence to supply chains and value chains to deal with that change. Next, goods graduations. So to make sure it's competitive for those LDCs, we do continue to exclude preferential tariffs for or like preference for countries in the standard preference tier, which is India and Indonesia. Again, that helps LDCs stay more competitive. If you go on to the next slide, Danielle, if that's okay. wider and more competitive scope. So as Danielle said, 65 developing countries are covered with the DCS. All in all, DCS countries import to the UK of a worth around up to £24 billion. So there's a lot of space here. And again, I'll just go on to the large opportunity in the UK market. So there is increasing import demand for new trading partners. Some of our developing countries will be the new trading partners in the future. So ensuring that we are building economic ties with these countries. And then next we've got easy access to information. I'll talk a bit more about this in the next slide, but we've made some products that are business friendly, some guidance to help UK importers, exporters, and businesses in the UK, as well as in DCS countries, which I'll talk a bit about in the next slide, if that's okay, Danielle. So we hear a lot from businesses that whilst the scheme can be great, it can be hard to find reliable buyers in some of these developing countries. And likewise, those businesses in developing countries, they might find it difficult to find UK buyers. So one of the tools that we have is the Growth Gateway Help Desk. So this is like an advisory service that aims to link businesses and investors with African businesses and investors. What you can do is you can send your queries in and they'll be able to give you tailored support and advice to sort of like match make you with a business in Africa. This is currently only in Africa, but we are trying to see if we can expand that. We also have the UK importer database. So if you, this is more not for businesses in the UK, but if you're a business in a DCS countries, you can input the product or the HS code onto there, and you can see if there's a UK buyer that's interested in that product. Another thing I can understand, it's quite difficult to wrap your head around customs and sort of like how to go through the procedures of claiming preferences. So we have made business-friendly guides that do speak about sort of understanding the rules of origin, understanding how our custom sort of like arrangements. And then we also have here as well an interactive visualization tool. So this tool, it's really fun to play around with. So you can see sort of some of the trade flows between DCS countries and the UK, and you can also see if there's, you can also see the output sort of like of products that are being sent to the UK. So you can click on a country, you can see, for instance, oh, there's a lot of like T-shirts coming out of, say, Bangladesh, and you can see the preference utilization rates of that if that's of interest as well. So you can sort of scope out areas that are and products that are of high potential to you as a business if you're interested in sourcing from those countries. If we go on to the last slide, we do have our inbox here as well if you have any more detailed questions. But we going to take some questions now if there are any. We'll be really we'll try our best to help answer any questions if you have. Any questions? Okay, no worries. If not, we'll be hanging around. If you've got more technical questions, we're a really friendly bunch. Or if you want to have a nag about anything as well, we're very open to see if we can make make policy easier for UK businesses as well. But yeah, thank you so much for listening.